everyone. Welcome back to the Guidebook Greenroom. Happy Friday and happy April. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. Spring is in full mode. I don't know what I was going to say there, but spring is here and it brings with, I think, with it more positivity, longer days, and all of that good stuff. I'm enjoying getting out for warmer, kind of brighter walks either before
Mhm.
or after work at the minute. And I think that is just makes the days and the weeks nicer. So I'm good. How about you?
I love that. I am in North Carolina, which, if you don't know, is currently coated in bright yellow pollen right now. So I'm not going outside, but it looks great from indoors.
Yeah, I saw something the other day, and as far as I'm aware, here in the UK, we do not get pollen blankets, is the only way I
Mhm.
can describe it, like you all have right now. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's an experience. I've lived here almost my entire life, and this year is genuinely worse than it normally is. But it's all right. Stay medicated, stay hydrated, and there's no point washing your car. Just let it be yellow. Um, that's my top tip for you today, Green Room listeners.
Love
Well, I
it.
wanted to hear your thoughts, Nathan, on some topical topics. Recently, I was reading the Bold Push newsletter, and Julius Solaris brought up some interesting points about the impact of tariffs and other kind of geopolitical concerns on the events industry. And I thought maybe we could hear from you, just how do we handle this, right? I think event organizers always have to worry about costs, right? There's not a time where you're not considering costs, but in our contemporary context, costs are rising, and also there's some more uncertainty around travel. So, what's your take? What are you thinking about the current landscape of events?
Yeah, it's a great question and a nerving time, let's say. And I think that the industry has been surprisingly resilient in the last 5 years. And even before that, I do think it is another challenge that, let's be honest, the event industry doesn't need. There's been so much positivity and I think collective excitement around the fact that the industry was really bouncing back. I mean, if you rewind the kind of October last year, the excitement of how the industry was growing, the investment that's coming in, the startups that are entering the space for different technologies and reasons. Like there was just so much hope and optimism for 2025. And after what has been, a challenging time of COVID, I kind of think like the industry deserved it a little bit. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, we're talking about recession. We've been talking about inflation for a while. We've been living with global conflicts, and events have been able to navigate through that as they did with COVID. But it just feels like to me with these new tariffs and the tensions that are coming, it's like an unnecessary challenge for the industry. And look, the kind of the real impact is people are going to decrease travel. Events have global audiences. That's what makes them so great. They're going to feel that impact, especially. There's risk of sponsorship cancellations. We're not looking at COVID level disruption, right? The world's not going to shut down, thank God. But it's definitely another recalibration. And I think when an industry was really turning itself around. And let's be honest, with mostly just the will of the people that work in the industry, it just feels like an unnecessary recalibration. And the one thing I will say to all of that though is, look, after the '08 crash,
Mhm.
events went through a really challenging time and came back so much stronger. We were starting to see some of that now after COVID. Like the one thing that's true about events is their importance never goes, and ultimately we will find a way through it. It's
Mhm.
just it's just frustrating because it's somewhat unnecessarily inflicted and like venue costs are already high Inventory is short in a lot of cities. Event organizers are really thinking strategically more than ever. So how we approach them is changing once again.
Yeah, yeah. It almost feels like it's unfair, like it's not a personal attack on the events industry, of course, but uh maybe we could get a little bit of a break. Would be nice. Right. I think some things you touched on there, kind of the historic perspective, I think is important to keep in mind of the events industry is resilient, event planners are resilient. We get things done no matter what's thrown our way. So like we can handle it, right? But what are the nuances about our contemporary context? Like what do we need to know to face this uncertainty? And I think Julius had shared a few recommendations in the newsletter, and I was wondering, like, do you agree or disagree with those? Kind of like, what's your advice for the community, kind of for the world that we live in right now?
Yeah, I think let's kind of like look at the five things that were suggested and kind of agree and disagree. Like I think the first one was book venues early, and
Mhm.
costs are rising and availability is limited. So the recommendation was lock in venues now for future editions. I think ultimately like that's sound advice, but it's not it's not a possibility for everyone, right? I mean,
Mhm.
one of the trends we've seen post-COVID is that people are booking later, and that really makes it difficult to manage your event needs in terms of space, food and beverage, like all of those things. So event planners are currently like operating under that almost just in time
Mhm.
structure. So I think, do look at the cities and the states that you're potentially hosting your events in. There will be differences depending on that. And I actually think and this is going to be not possible for every event, but if you need to move your event out of a city or state where you might find opportunity to cut costs or create a better experience somewhere else. So I do think it's time to maybe reassess where you're hosting your event at certain venues and use it as an opportunity. People may question why you're moving an event in normal times, but actually you'll have a narrative that supports the need to do so. And I think that can work in your favor. And with that as well, go to places where there are good local suppliers, because that will help with costs. But yeah, I think trying to book venues early does make sense, especially if you're able to lock in costs. And I know quite a few people have been doing that, especially with fears of inflation. And that kind of links to the second one about reviewing contracts, especially force majeure. It's funny, like I remember back in sort of like 2012, 2013, 2014, I was negotiating venue contracts all the time and looking at force majeure, and I was just like, I'm just never going to need this stuff. And like now, it's like really scrutinize those force majeure clauses, like really be confident in negotiating that flexibility into your contracts and making
Mhm.
sure that if there are clauses that they're ironclad to support you. And I also think when you're looking at contracts as well, really think about those payment plans, um, and trying to ease pain where possible. The industry has quite public data now on late booking, for instance, post COVID, and try and use that to your strength in negotiating contracts with hotels. And the one thing I will say about my first point, assess where you're hosting your event, whether that's city or state, is there are going to be more cities or states that are trying to win business from
Mhm.
events, right? And there's your historic conference towns and event cities. Um, but there are people looking for the opportunity to bring in these big events to their cities because it creates great business for hotels, for restaurants, for bars, for shops and tourism. So where there's pain, there is opportunity, and I think you may find more favorable contracts in other places.
Mhm.
Um, the third point was value proposition, and that is so true. Like as budgets tighten, you need a compelling reason. But for me, that's just been something that has always been so true to every event I've ever worked on, and it kind of anything that we ever do. And this was one of the I think interesting things about COVID was as hard as it is, COVID trimmed the fat. Events had a great run up until the COVID pandemic. And there are always really strong events that will not die. There are events that will be kind of thinking of the pain that is coming right now and being like, we're sound, we've got this, ultimately we know we've got a really tight proposition, a really loyal audience, and a real people have a real need to go to those events. So I think it's a good time for everyone to exercise um like thinking about their value proposition. I remember, we always used to look at like audience, like who's this for? Like why now? Why is this event important? And if we can't answer that question, like we really should be able to. And then just like what's going to make us stand out against our competition. And I think events really need to do that. So yeah, value proposition is important now, but I would argue that it always is, and you should always be trying to drill down, really think about your niche. And niche could be audience, it could be topic, it could be experience. Like just find something that clearly positions your event differently. Um, Fourth kind of links that as well, that Julius mentioned around prioritizing business outcomes. I do think people are going to have to fight to attend events more internally. That's always been a challenge. People that attend events aren't all decision makers. They're people that have to ask their boss, ask their manager, get time out of the office, obviously costs. So I think events that can provide their potential attendees with the resources to demonstrate the value of the event will do better. And I think that starts with a clear value proposition. And then you can build out all of your messaging from that. Um, what's the learnings, what's the networking opportunities, the KPIs, etc. And then the last one was virtual options. And the good thing about this is the event industry got good at this during COVID.
Mhm.
It wasn't the industry that it is today, and we saw it here at Guidebook with people's needs. So yeah, I think having that flexibility, people will want to keep that international audience, and those people who maybe aren't flying, or whether that's budget, whether that's because their company you know, puts in policies to kind of counter tariffs, or all of that, anything that can happen. I don't want to get into politics of it all, but I do think like utilize the progress that was made in COVID to have those virtual offerings. Um, and we kind of should be thinking about that anyway, because it's an accessibility piece, right? Virtual. It's like
True.
not everyone can attend events or has the luxury to. But if you're an event that's focused around content, right, going virtual's pretty not easy, but easier for you than an event that's really about kind of in-person connection. But there's always ways, like we do it here at Guidebook, right, with our Guidebook labs, where we get customers in a Zoom together and we chat about different topics and different things. Like there's always a way. And I think virtual networking, it just needs to be shorter, more focused, and all of that good stuff. So I think Julius was definitely on the right track with those five things. And I just think, yeah, definitely think about how that can impact your event. And there's a lot of different ways to build on his current kind of thoughts around it.
Yeah, thanks for running through those. I think as you were kind of describing these different pieces, I was thinking, just keep doing what you're doing, right? Like these are good practices to mitigate risk and deliver value regardless of what may be happening in the world. But I do think there are important nuances to emphasize in that context. Touching on like venues and contracts, yeah, like it's we want to plan ahead, but there's also information you don't get until the last minute, or registrations you don't lock in until the last minute. So how there's just push and pull between, being proactive versus reactive that I think is difficult to navigate, but it's not anything new. Event planners have been doing that this whole time. So just buckle down and power through it. Um, and then for your value proposition and kind of your KPIs and reaching your audiences, that got me thinking, sure, a majority of events are driving revenue, or there's like a business goal, or um, you might be thinking about kind of hard data and like the dollars coming in and out around your events. But also, like in these times of turbulence and conflict, and kind of in our digital era, like people are looking for connection. So like engagement has to be one of your metrics and it has to be one of your goals. And also like just as a consumer, I love those kind of fan conventions or those um, events about media where I'm not there to do business. I'm not, I mean, maybe I'm buying something at the exhibit booth, but I'm not there like on behalf of Guidebook or thinking as a product manager, how am I expanding my network? I'm there to talk to people who also love this book or also love this show or also love this music. And I think those kinds of events are still critical, right?
Mm.
Like they're kind of in the business of joy, is one way to think about it, as opposed to the medical industry or whatever it may be. So keep doing what you're doing, right? Like event planners, we've got this, right? We can navigate this. There are some things that are familiar from COVID times and before. And there are some kind of new intricacies, again, with the travel component that might be worrisome, but we'll figure it out. We have the technology, and we have the willpower. I love how you said that earlier, that largely by the will of event planners, we made it through. And we'll keep doing it, right? Um, I do want to touch on technology a little bit more as guidebookers.
Mhm.
Yes, we have made progress and updated our offering to remain, modern and of service with contemporary times. So, what's next? Like, where does our event management platform fit into this evolving landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think just before I answer that, your point there about, I kind of speak through a lens sometimes of very B2B conferences because that's where the
Mhm.
bulk of my experience has been. But you're so right that I think anyone from from a work, a personal, whatever it is, like attend those events you love, right? If you can,
Mhm.
I think support those events because there are going to be people who can't, and if you're in a position where you can, like events need those who can right now. So I think yeah, events are great and we need them to survive.
Mhm.
So yeah, keep going if you're fortunate enough to be able to. But on the guidebook piece, in times of uncertainty, tighter budgets, I do believe guidebook becomes more valuable to event organizers. Our platform can address several of these challenges. Every dollar counts. So our solution does help streamline operations. It does reduce costs associated with printed materials, signage updates, last minute changes. And last minute changes, especially like these things, no matter what the industry is facing, events will always face these challenges of last minute updates, needing to communicate with people in real time, needing to reach everyone en masse during certain moments. So yeah, I think like those savings will matter more than ever. And like that value that you can extract from a product like Guidebook really, really does count. Um, Second, I feel like we can help deliver on that critical value proposition.
Mhm.
We have engagement features, we have personalized agendas, we have networking tools that allow people to create meaningful connections that you can't do through social media or purely virtual environments. So exactly what Julius noted, what people are seeking from events, I think our platform can allow that. And especially if you're trying to generate some form of cohesive experience between the virtual and the physical, like Guidebook can really do that, at least from connecting people if they aren't able to be there and stuff like that. So I think that's really important. And I think third, one of my favorites, analytics. But it gives hard data, and people are going to need to demonstrate ROI, whether that's sponsors or stakeholders. So data needs to be comprehensive and it needs to tell a story. And I think the way in which we present our data at Guidebook allows event planners, event organizers to do just that. So I think, yeah, when business outcomes are being prioritized, having metrics to back up your event's impact is super essential. And I think like finally, our platform works across global markets, right? We have
Mhm.
multilingual support, we have offline functionality, we are helping to maintain accessibility for international attendees. So just the fact that we're able to be a partner in working with event planners to connect everyone whether that's from different countries, different circumstances, whatever it is, I think is super important. And I just think like the bottom line is when it is getting more complex, when the landscape is getting more complex, you need to have the right technology partner. And when I think about the work that me and you are doing in,
Mhm.
Guidebook Labs and really speaking to our customers more and more frequently and trying to find the best way to bring them together and, to help them navigate challenges almost without us, but in the space that we create, then, whether it's us or, any technology you're using, right, look to them to be a partner, look to them to
Mhm.
work with you through this. And that doesn't just mean about like cutting costs, it's more about adding value, adding knowledge and experience, and bringing more of your peers together. So yeah, I think that it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's something that's kind of an unspoken thread there, which is um, event planners, you're not alone in this, right? And you don't have to figure it all out by yourselves. Like we have each other, but also ask your audiences what they want, right? Um, with the data, with the engagement, like trying to make these personalized experiences, just ask them, like, what would be valuable to you? What would it take for you to book that flight or hop on the train? Like, um, your audiences are part of your community as well as the event planning network. And uh, just as we want to have these events to inform, engage, and nurture connections, like do that as part of your work itself as
Mm.
well. It's a little meta there, but I think apply that thinking to your own work, so you're not so isolated. Um, so to wrap up here, thanks for sharing all of these insights, and shout out to Julius for a great newsletter, inspiring our episode today. Another kind of fundamental thread I think we're talking about here is making order from chaos and creating just enough structure that you can nurture and inspire kind of like organic value. Like we're not trying to be prescriptive and say this is what your event's going to be, but with everything going on, let's get together. Here's the plan, and then also bring your own ideas, bring your own energy, bring your own feedback. I think that's what makes a really good event. It also makes a really good team, right? When you're connecting with people. So I think my piece of advice to folks navigating the turbulence is just remind yourself what you can control and then what might be beyond your sphere of influence, and just make the best choices with the information you have, as you've been doing all along. We don't know what might be on the news tomorrow, but we can do our best and just keep doing the work. It's important, it's valuable, and people want it, right? People want to get together and share ideas and um, engage with their communities and feel connected, and then go back energized. You know, close those deals, do whatever it may be. So, again, thanks, Nathan. I appreciate you walking us through everything today, and it's always great to catch up with you.
Yeah, likewise. And yeah, thanks for another great conversation. And yeah, just to shout out anyone who doesn't follow Julius Solaris's newsletter or anything like that. I think it's worth giving it a follow, especially in times like these. He's a big voice in the industry. So yeah, give that a follow because you're going to need more insights now from as many
Mhm.
angles as possible.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. We'll see you all next Friday.
Bye.